did. We're going to call to the stage several members of the filmmaking team and also some folks who are in the film. So hold your applause when we call to the stage Judge Jimmie Edwards, who founded Innovative Concept Academy, currently our city's Director of Public Safety. I believe Quentin Jackson, teacher, is still in the audience. Quentin, where are you? Come on down. Landon Pitts, did you sneak back in? If you haven't, all right. Please also welcome our producer, Iyabo Boyd, our producer, Bradley Rayford, our producer and director of photography, Nicholas Weissman, and our two directors, Landon Van Soest and Jeremy Levine. Microphones in the audience, and some folks will be able to take some questions. We'd like for you to really guide the conversation. We can go on at length, but I will tell you very, very briefly, this film premiered in February at the Berlin Film Festival, and in April we were at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York. We have been literally around the world with this St. Louis story, and we never viewed it as solely a St. Louis story. For us, it very much is an American story with an American star. It was an incredible adventure for us to participate. Booney, just a first question to you. What are you doing now? Tell the audience, please, what you're up to right now.
Well, working on going to college next semester with a full scholarship.
Early on, one of the test screenings we did for local audiences, would you stop? Was attended by a provost of St. Louis Community College. He was so moved by Booney's ambition and Booney's story that he responded to create an opportunity for her to have a full scholarship to attend the Forest Park Community College. Questions? What have you got? Jody's got a microphone. We know there are questions out there.
Way back.
Way in the back, Jody. Last rows.
First of all, thank you. It was great to watch this. I'm sorry. So I was just wondering how you were selected for this movie and how it felt whenever you were asked to be in this movie and asked to share your experience with the world.
Jeff, can I deal with it?
I believe the question was directed at Daje, Judge.
Daje.
Well, and one of the scenes in the movie, I was at my friend's house and we was just talking about a whole bunch of stuff that was going on. And the next day, well, I walked in her house. And I had no idea cameras was gonna be there, so I walked in. I was like, "What's going on?" So she's like, "They from the school, they cool." So we just talking, going about a normal day. The next day, Judge came and got me out of class. I was scared because I was always into something. So he said, "Some men want to talk to you." So I went downstairs. 3 or 4 hours. I didn't even know they passed. We was just talking about stuff I never even conversated with my own mom about. It was just like the trust thing from day one. Yeah.
Thank you. See, he won't let me talk, but you're gonna let me talk. I appreciate that. Let me first of all thank the filmmakers. They came in from the East Coast, the West Coast, from all over the place, and I think that they did a fantastic job. So you guys just give it up for the filmmakers. This movie really wasn't about Daje. In fact, I just fell into the trap movie. When I was up in New York and did the Tribeca Film Festival, the question was whether it was a movie. In fact, it's a documentary. There was one shot, no actors, no actresses. We gave full access, as you can see. They had access in the labor room, access in the courtroom, they had full access. The only place that I was unable to give them access to was the jail because we couldn't protect them inside of the jail. So if this was a movie, I would have corrected all that bad grammar. This was a documentary, a real documentary, and I'm just very, very proud of all of the folk. I would be remiss if I didn't ask those of you that are educators and teachers, would you just raise your hand for me, please? Thank you. Thank you. While this movie is about the school-to-prison pipeline, it's about sentencing reform, it's about bonds and bails, it's about compassion with teachers. There is so much that is in this film that I think everybody ought to be able to see themselves, or see somebody they know inside of the film. But I always want to compliment, first and foremost, all of the educators and all of the teachers for the compassion. So if you are educating the same way that those teachers at ICA educate, they do good when nobody's looking, I think that you're phenomenal. Thank you.
There's one in the, oh, you got one.
Hi, my name is Copyright. I'm a filmmaker as well, and I just want to say the documentary was awesome. But I wish that you would consider making that part of the public school system to show to, say, 6th graders, because to me that's a good prevention piece. And that was sort of my life story as well. And I think if you show that, make it mandatory that children see that, because that is not just a St. Louis thing, that's common, that is the norm, and not only in St. Louis in the urban areas, but all over the United States. I lived in California for 22 years, I've seen it there, I experienced it here. And if you could consider making that part of the school system for the children to see that in the 6th grade, maybe they won't experience one by the time they get to the 8th or the 9th. Thank you very much.
Jeremy and Landon, the directors, what drew you to this story, and what is the plan for the outreach and the mission work that she's discussing here?
Yep, whoa, that's loud. So, yeah, maybe I might just kind of start with that, which thank you for that comment, and it's definitely really important to us. We've been able to tour around with the film, and some of kind of the most exciting screenings we've had have been with high school students, and when Daje comes out, they go nuts for the celebrity. Those are really incredible and have opened up some pretty amazing conversations. So that's kind of in the works right now for us, and it is definitely really important kind of going forward so that this film gets seen by a wide audience, but also very specifically for high school and middle school students. So I think, you know, it just really does a pretty amazing job of opening up a dialogue.
I can back up a little bit to the first question. So, you know, Jeremy and I are based in New York, and Nick was when we started the film. Yabo as well. But I think, you know, we were really broadly interested in this idea of the school-to-prison pipeline, and we benefit tremendously from the relationship that Jeff had forged with Judge Edwards. We just had an incredible opportunity to come, you know, into the Innovative Concept Academy and sort of explore these issues. You know, we knew from the outset that we were really hoping to tell the story from a student's perspective and to really go, you know, as deep as we possibly could into her life experience and in a lot of the challenges that she was facing. But we actually talked to probably 30 or 40 different students at the school, had lengthy conversations like the one that Daje described. But Daje was not one of those students initially, and like she said, we were filming with one of her friends. She came into the room unannounced to us and kind of threw herself down on the bed and just quite literally stole the show. And I think so much credit is due to her, just in her honesty and in her openness, and then, you know, this incredible gift that she gave us as storytellers to really open her life, to, you know, to really break things down for us, and to really be a true kind of collaborator and partner in this process.
Got one here.
Well, you kind of answered my question anyway. That was what I was going to ask, is how did you find out to do the story? But Judge Edwards, or should I say Director Edwards now, what made you start the ICA program?
Well, I tell you, when I was the chief judge of the juvenile court back in 2009, actually it started in 2007 as the chief judge, I was seeing so many children come into my courtroom with Safe School Act violations. The 1995 Safe Schools Act. It's a zero tolerance law. In my mind, zero tolerance makes zero sense. We don't even expect zero tolerance from our adults, and we expect it from our children. And so our children were being locked out, administratively dropped out of school at 11 and 12 years old. They were put on the street, walking the street lawfully because they had been expelled from school. That just did not make sense to me. And so, out of a great deal of frustration, I decided that I would open a school without any experience with opening a school. I just knew that it was the right thing to do. And so as a result of those children walking our streets, I wanted them inside of the school. You see, the degree formality of learning continues irrespective of where they are, whether they're locked up in a jail cell or whether they're in a classroom. It begs the question, how do you want our children back in your neighborhood? Do you want them back with a more sophisticated criminal mind because we've neglected to put them in school? Or do you want them back with a better understanding of what it means to be decent and law-abiding, what it means to be smart? And so, in my mind, I chose the latter. It makes more sense to keep kids in school and out of court.
Good evening. My name is Bridgetti Dunning, and thank you for that wonderful film. I would like to say a couple of things, and then I have a question. I taught 7th grade language arts at Blow Middle School, and then I went to private secondary school where the kids were kicked out of the regular public school system, and basically it became a babysitting job. The public schools stopped contracting with my district, thus I was laid off, and now I work as a full-time correctional officer. I say that to say this: I make more money now as a correctional officer than I did teaching, and there's something wrong with that to me. Today I went to work and I supervised 3 juveniles. 2 of them are 15 years old with first-degree murder cases, and they sat most of the day of my 8 hours watching cartoons. Everybody has a story. And my side of it, working in corrections, I had asked a 23-year-old walking around the pod, why are you looking so mean? And I was so scared of him when I first worked there. And he said, Officer Dunning, I don't think you like me. And I said, why do you feel like that? You know, what is it that you would do different if you got out today? He said, nothing. Selling drugs is all I know. And then he came back and said nobody ever asked him what he wanted to do. We got to get back to the basic needs. The only thing that get me home in my 8 hours is hope. And I live on the north side where it's full of hopelessness. My question to you, Judge, and some of the panel members is, how do we connect what we're doing in the courts and what we're doing in the educational system, where that bus ride becomes longer and longer? I've seen so many students from my school to now I'm supervising them as a correctional officer. And one of your program, Judge, is a start. But how do we get the changers, the agents of change, to understand your purpose and to spread that around?
Well, I think that your point is well taken, and thank you so very much for your comment as well as your question. But let me say at the outset, the sky is not falling in the city of St. Louis with respect to education. We have wonderful educators. We have very compassionate people that are educating our children. The vast majority of our children are doing just fine. But for those that are not doing fine, we need people that are willing to go the extra mile, people that are willing to invest in something different. Too often we talk about a second chance or a third chance or a fourth chance. We don't need those types of chances. We need a different chance, something different, something new, and something innovative. And we have a lot of organizations right here in the city of St. Louis, I think, are just doing their best. So I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful for our children. I'm certainly very hopeful for our community. And so we will get there. It's going to take some time. But I think what this movie does, it opens up a lot of folks' eyes. Some of you probably didn't even recognize the city of St. Louis because you've never been to that side of the city of St. Louis. Some of you didn't even recognize or could not even fathom how children live. And then they come to school, and then you expect to teach them that the square root of 2 is 1.414, the square root of 3 is 1.73267. That's not going to happen coming out of the environments that they live in. So this is bigger than just education. It's about economics, it's about housing, it's about all of those things that we have to fix.
I'd like to quickly pivot that question to a couple of the other panelists as well. As documentary filmmakers, we went into this with an idea of the story we wanted to tell, but as I said in our introduction, we didn't know exactly where that story was going to lead us. We were incredibly blessed to capture intimate mentoring moments between a mother and a daughter, between teachers and students. On the panel, we have Quentin Jackson, the teacher who was Daje's best pal during much of the moments that you saw in the film, and also Landon Pitts, an administrator currently at Innovative Concept Academy, who was the man who was reaching out to try and help Antonio at various points in the film. Mr. Jackson, talk a little bit, please, about the kinds of students that you encountered in this environment and how you reached them.
Good afternoon, good evening. What time is it? But the type of students that I would have to say that I was teaching were me when I was growing up. I'm a product of St. Louis Public Schools. I went to Soda Inn. I got in my trouble. I know I messed up, but I see this being more of a blessing for me. I'm able to go back and reach to the kids that were making the same mistakes that I was making. It's so many times that Booney was coming to me saying that she had this problem, that problem, and the other problem. I think the real problem is we have a lot of teachers that don't understand because they've never been in those situations. And the fact that I have lived or I have friends that went through situations that Booney was going through, I was able to relate. I was able to break it down and make her understand. She was able to say, oh, okay, it makes sense now. So when you ask like what type of students I have, you have to be a reflection of the students that you teach. Just be honest with yourself as a teacher. If you're actually in a classroom and you are not getting to your students, I'd rather you bow out gracefully and let somebody come in and replace. Because all you're doing is hurting that student because you're yelling at them, you tell them what they can't do, and at the end of the day, you just redirected them to what they already been told from at home or somewhere else. I'd rather you just bow out, let somebody come in that probably has a better chance, and let them do what they do. Because I'm telling you right now, when I got in the classroom, Booney, who else? All the other students, they love me because I was able to relate. So if you can't relate, all I just say is, there's other school districts. That's just people that look like that.
Landon, you currently run a program called Mentors in Motion. You are for lack of a better description, kind of a dean of students. Like Judge Edwards, you are a no-nonsense character within that school environment, but you also are an incredibly effective relator to the children. Talk a little bit about how you do that and what you're doing now.
Well, if you know Judge Jimmie Edwards, you know that there is no off time. So you see me at the house because we believe in this vision and we want to see things work in the community. So being a member of the community, I too am a product of St. Louis, and just him taking us under his wing and showing us that it's more in life than just the normal school day. So you'll catch me at a kid house because I care that much. I started a nonprofit organization called Mentors in Motion, where we educate kids through entrepreneurship. So we have a model that shows the correlation between classroom settings and community real life applications. So that's where my passion is, that's where my compassion comes from. And Judge is one of those anchors in the community that support everybody and he want to make a difference. So using these different organizations, really help.
Got a question here.
Testing. Okay, very good. First off, I want to say to the judge, congratulations on your new appointment with the city of St. Louis. And of course, you have a standing record of being very successful. My question is, due to your new appointment as the director of public safety, is that correct? How do you tie that into, and what steps do you feel that you'll be making as a correlation as far as the schools as well as what's happening on the streets?
Well, thank you very much. With respect to my new position, I'm very, very honored to have the opportunity to go to work for the citizens of the city of St. Louis. And when Mayor Lyda Cruz asked me if I would consider, I pondered quite a bit about that. I contemplated about how could I make a difference and what change could I bring to the city of St. Louis. Ultimately, I answered two questions. Yes, I respected and respect Lyda Cruz, and secondly, I love our city dearly, and I thought that I could make a difference. But then there was the condition of me accepting the position of Director of Public Safety, and that condition was I will continue to operate my school, Innovative Concept Academy. So I intend to continue to do that. But there is a correlation. Anytime you're dealing with law enforcement, public safety, and schools that are failing, you're going to have criminal justice issues. So there is in fact some type of correlation. Right, way down front. We got one back there. There's a mic back there.
Yeah, we got one back here.
So back to the front here, questions.
There's questions all over. We'll try to get as many as we can.
But go ahead back there. I think.
I just had a quick question. I know in the film it says about 3 years probation for Antonio. As we look at kind of 3 years out, can we get an update on where he's at and he's doing?
All right, Antonio. Antonio is doing 7 years in prison. Antonio's probation was violated after he pled guilty in the municipality. That's one of those issues of sentencing reform that we need to address, that a kid can plead guilty without an attorney over and over and over again and end up in prison for 7 years for $2 worth of marijuana, or either be in jail for a whole month because they don't have $300 to get them out of jail. And those are the types of things that we have to address and that we have to fix in our state, and we certainly have to fix it in our city.
Judge Edwards, tell your story. I know it, go back to Jewish Hospital. You are an inspiration.
You know, I'm gonna have to invite you guys to have a conversation with Judge Edwards one day, so that I don't, will be respectful of the others here. But I came out of the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex, came out of the St. Louis Public Schools, went to St. Louis University undergraduate. I was blessed, and because I really appreciate the generosity of others. So everything that I received in my life was because some stranger decided that they were going to help me, somebody I did not know. And so going to St. Louis University's undergraduate school at St. Louis University, law school, I actually internalized, I sincerely internalized that it is what I do for others that matters most. And so that's the basis of the things that I do. I think it's important that I continue to try to lift up everybody, irrespective of their station in life, irrespective of who they are, what they look like, their gender, their race, it doesn't matter. I think that we're all in this together, and we have an obligation to each other to be helpful and to be supportive. Thanks for your question.
Hi, my name is Maria.
2015, I moved from St. Louis County to a predominantly white school in St. Charles. And being there, I started trying to get involved with newspaper and my club here, Diversity Club. We're trying to raise awareness about, the problems in society and, racial problems and discrimination, stuff like that. And in newspaper, there have been a couple of times where we tried to put stuff in the paper about how they called it the minority issue in our school, about how there's only say 8% of African Americans at our school and stuff like that, but it's still kind of superficial and not like a real problem. They're not really making it as, or writing the issues about how they really should be put out. And my question to you is, what can you tell students at my school, a predominantly white school, who need to know about these society problems? And B, why is it important for these people to know these things that are going on basically across the bridge in our community?
Who's that direction to?
Anybody?
I mean, I think part of the reason that we do the work that we do is from a very similar point, that I think we don't have these conversations often enough, and that I think, our upbringing was probably pretty similar to the school that you went to, that we didn't have the opportunity to interact a lot with, people like Daje and in these communities. So I think in a lot of ways we're sort of trying to stimulate that conversation. We're trying to bring audiences in to have these conversations like the one that we're having right now. I think there are probably people up here better qualified for me to talk about some of the local circumstances.
I might just add to, we have been able to kind of tour around with the film a bit and talk to a bunch of people, and something that was, that's really personal to me and just show, as Landon said, we grew up in pretty different schools. I grew up in the suburbs outside Boston, and a lot of my friends growing up in a mostly white school, they were caught with marijuana. They stole things in convenience stores. And the circumstances, the consequences of their actions were 100% different from what, Daje and Antonio deal with. And I think that's incredibly important for kids, white kids, for kids of privilege who don't, who never, they're just given tremendous amounts of slack and forgiveness. And that is not, it's not the same for somebody like Antonio. And it's heartbreaking to all of us that somebody, Antonio at 17 years old, has a felony for the rest of his life. And then these are just like small things that kind of spiral out of control.
Again, Ahkeem still show.
You called me.
All right, more questions. Feel free to raise the hand and go right next to you, right next to you.
Hi, my name is Amy Johnson. I'm a 5th grader myself, and you guys have inspired me. I've seen people get suspended from school, so I have been trying to stay out of that, get my grades, and that documentary just makes me want to get out of trouble more.
My question is really kind of answered before, but I have a two-part question. Really first for Daje, I'd like for you to hear from you more. First of all, for you and the filmmakers, who do you see as the target audience of this film? Like who's the core audience that you want to make sure sees this film? Other than that other question, which is kind of answered and asked before, is as we leave here tonight and other audiences see this film, what's sort of the call to action? We've seen the film, now what can we do, what should we do? Because I feel like a lot of us, not to say everyone in the room, a lot of us have these conversations all the time. I'm from St. Louis. I went to public school here. I live in New York City now and have for a long time. We have this conversation all the time in New York City, uptown, Harlem, Washington Heights, where I live. So seeing a film like this, which is beautifully shot, well made, well produced, what am I supposed to do now when I go back home or while I'm in St. Louis? Like, what's the actual thing we can do watching this film? Because conversations are happening, and as you know. So beyond just conversation, what do we do in response to this? So Daje and Antonio and other kids like them aren't put in this situation over and over again.
I mean, I think, as far as the film is concerned, so we kind of see this as the beginning of a conversation. And we're working with a couple of, nonprofit organizations that specialize specifically in sort of using documentary films for social action. So through that, we're bringing the film, not only to audiences like this, through kind of film festivals, universities, and, the kind of standard channels, so to speak. We're also doing very kind of direct targeted screenings for policymakers in Washington, D.C. A lot of organizations that can kind of use this in their own advocacy, advocating for educational reform, advocating for criminal justice reform, in a variety of different issues, and people that, are sort of more qualified to sort of leverage that kind of policy change than we are. It's getting very distracting. But I think that, and a huge part of our inspiration for that too, that, there are people kind of in power that we really hope can see the film, that can sort of connect with them, not just on kind of a policy or kind of a statistical level, but that it's a very human, a human story for us that we really want, to connect in kind of a universal human level, to really kind of experience the emotions of the issues that are kind of talked about in those contexts a lot. But I think really what is most motivating for us, I think, are some of the comments from some of the young people that see their own experience on film, and can kind of see, some of that reflected and start to have some of those conversations at a very young age as well, and to sort of recognize some of those trends that are kind of much broader kind of social pressures. If they can recognize those things in their own lives, hopefully kind of point out and prevent pitfalls.
As the guy said earlier, we have showed the film to now, probably over a couple thousand teenage kids who really recognize themselves in Daje. We've also, even though we haven't been able to show it in prisons in St. Louis, but we all live in New York, so we've shown it in a couple different prison populations in New York, which has been really incredible. And Daje was able to join us for a couple of those times too. And it was really amazing to see the men recognize themselves in Antonio's story and thinking about Daje as their daughter or their girl back at home and what they're doing, where they are, and how that reflects on how they want to change themselves, and thinking about, how this girl makes them want to be a better man. And that's really incredible for us. It's important for us. Like I said, we just played in St. Louis, the 24-1 theater. So we want to be in places where folks who identify with people on screen can also see it, in their own neighborhoods, reflect on their own lives.
Yeah, I'll add to that as well. That just just some background on the film. We opened this film in Berlin in January of this year. We had theaters full of 600 or 700 people, and it was absolutely incredible. We went to Tribeca. We had a really big opening there. We went to Hot Docs. We went to AFI Docs, all these different places, and then as of 3 weeks ago, we opened theatrically in New York at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. We went to Los Angeles. We're playing tonight in Atlanta.